Welcome to this edition of the Million Dollar Mastermind podcast. This is where we pick the brains of high achievers from all walks of life and get their hard-earned, real-world insights on winning. I'm your host, Larry Weidel. I'm here with Colin McIntosh, and Colin's from Denver, Colorado, transplanted Floridian, and sounds like you're permanently planted in Denver.
I am. I've been here 7 years now, and I just got engaged 2 months ago. So thank you. Got engaged out in Moab. Totally beautiful, stunning place out there in Utah. Have you been?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Spectacular, special place. We're thinking about doing the wedding out there, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm a Coloradan. I'm not going anywhere, and I bought my first house last year and a half ago, where I'm sitting in now, and it's wonderful to have roots in a place. I grew up in Florida. I went to school in Atlanta. I worked at Bridgewater Associates in Connecticut right out of school. I flew out to Seattle. I worked at a startup in Seattle, and so it's really nice to feel connected to a place.
When you how long have you been going and sharing ideas at the entrepreneur on entrepreneurship back at Emory?
Since 2014, I think, was the first time I went.
Wow. So you're
I
an all pro of this now.
You know what? Actually, I think it was 2015. I think it was when I went through Techstars the first time with the last company I was at. They reached out and they asked me, hey, would you come talk about accelerators and your experience with Techstars? Because Emory doesn't really have that robust of at least it didn't used to have a very robust entrepreneurship program. In fact, when I was in college, I wanted to start a business, and the school had a policy that said you were not allowed to start businesses on campus because of legal liability. And I got into a big fight with the dean, and he said, look, we're not gonna let you start this business because we just have a policy of students aren't allowed to start businesses on campus. And it was like 2010 or 2011, and I told him, I said, hey man, you call yourself the Harvard of the South. You think Harvard doesn't let their students start businesses on campus? What type of, yeah. And I said, so look, I said, I'll give you two options. I'll never forget this conversation. I said, two options. One is you let me start my business, and I will be, in the future, I'll be a big donator to Emory, and I'll remember that you guys really, helped me out on my journey. Or two, you don't let me start my business, and I'll never donate a cent to Emory in my entire life. And he just goes, two. And I was like, great. And I walked out the door, and I was like, and I literally, every time they call me, I go, let me tell you a story about a conversation I had with the dean 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And, but, I give back I go back and I teach, and I like to lecture and that sort of thing. And, but yeah, I don't give any money to that school. What do
you think of the most important things? If you kind of come around to realizing the most important things for kids coming up who are interested in entrepreneurship, which would probably be the same things and then they need to know, questions they have, probably the same things for people who are not in grad school and are starting a business or wanting to start a business. So what do you impress upon them as insights?
So on a macro level, I would tell I tell all the kids this at Emory. I say, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to be an accountant. I want to do this. I want to do that. And I was like, all right, well, let me tell you what that looks like. I'm like, it looks like working for somebody else, having their stresses be your stresses. You will never make as much money as you want to make. It will always be tied to the business's performance, your competitive landscape for who they can rehire in your field. And I'm like, and I said, you guys are smart kids with good educations, and you will always be able to go down that path, always. Whereas if you start a business, the worst thing that can possibly happen to you is in 6 months, the company doesn't do well, and you'll figure that out pretty quickly. In fact, you can do it a lot faster than 6 months if you have some barriers set up to see if you're actually doing what you need to be doing. And I said, in the best case outcome is that you can change the course of your life. The cost benefit analysis for people who are privileged enough to have good educations and have the fallback option of a good career, it is so skewed in favor of starting a business that it is mind-boggling to me that every single one of my friends in Denver who is a professional has not yet started their own business. It blows my mind. And so I always try to let them know that the risk is so much lower than the reward for starting your own business.
Now, is that an eye opener for them? It seems like they would have thought about this.
I think
Can you judge by the questions you get or the response you get?
I mean, if you're a kid, you're 22 and you get a 6-figure offer out of school at a bank or something like that, it's, it's hard to say no to. Like, it's hard,
right.
And I think there is value in working for someone else for a while and learning, at that company. But, so I'm not encouraging people to drop out and start a business or give up on a career path. But I think that after a few years, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe you're in your 30s, you have a little bit more money saved up. Like, I think the real trouble is people get into this life path where they're 31, they're 32, they're getting married, they have a really nice income with their job, they're gonna have a kid,
they're stuck.
And the risks start to pile up in their mind. Right. But even so, you can start a business on the side. You can figure out in 3 months if it's going to work or not. And usually the worst case scenario is you cost yourself a few $1,000s and 3 months of earning potential.
Right. And I think you understand it exactly. It's like going right out of school. Probably
the difficulty is way higher because you don't have a Rolodex, you don't have training.
You probably need more life experiences, contacts.
Right.
And, you need to probably emotionally grow up, and, and the ones that I've talked to on this podcast that seem to have had, somehow they got it in their mind, like right from the beginning. See, where I think you're doing them a favor, even the people that might argue with you, I'm going to get it, I want security or whatever. The thing is that they need to hear it.
Right.
So when things happen to them, like if you work for a corporation, you're gonna get screwed. And it might be 2 years, 20 years, and the sooner the better. Because if you're 20 years, now you got the bigger home, you got the bigger obligations, the kids are going to college. And, when they toss you out, like right now, Jamie Dimon, who I've been in business with before, Jamie running JP Morgan, they're getting ready to putting the squeeze on employees to show up in offices because they've got a lot of retail space and they want to break that cycle of people working at home, and so he's getting ready to move. He's got a lot of reasons to want to force people to show up. But here's a figure that came out of there. They're getting a brand new huge building in New York City, and they're going to have 15,000 employees go in there. Now, let me ask you, you're one of 15,000, you better swim upstream very quickly because, when they do it's the thing of corporation that you need to know is that corporations are like glaciers. They look like monoliths.
Yes.
They never change, big piece of concrete, but they're always changing. They're always melting. Cracks are always involved somewhere in there, and they're calving and big sections are falling off here and there, and they're morphing. Corporations are morphing. And if they decide to lay off a division or this, that, the other, or, whatever, move something to another country or another state, you're gone. And not you personally,
No, it's the thing I tell people is like, I don't know. Some people want to work for other people. I got fired from my first job, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I think that like a lot of people need to have that wake up call before they're actually ready to go out on a limb and start their own business. You've got to get your healthcare ripped away from you suddenly. You've got to get your salary ripped away from you suddenly. You've got to get screwed. You've got to get mean. You got to get angry. Like there's got to be something that happens, because most people, the inertia is so powerful that if they have a comfortable life and they like their life
Right.
and they're moving on with
Exactly.
it, they won't risk that, even though I think that they just overblow the risk in their minds. I think that that's the thing, is they think it's like this really scary prospect. And I think the other thing is this fear of failure that people have. Like, if Sheets and Giggles goes out of business, like, which is always a possibility, for a young company, like in
Right.
a high growth company, like if it does that, I will feel bad, but I won't feel like a failure. Like in the sense
Right.
of like, I will regret decisions I made. I will regret things that I could have done better. But at the same time, it's just a corporation. It's just an idea. It's nebulous, it's not. And so for me, like I feel really good in saying that like I'm not defined by my company. I say that as I'm wearing a Sheets and Giggles shirt in a Sheets and Giggles office. But that's actually one of the reasons what we talked about earlier with social media, is that's one of the reasons why my persona is not completely tied to my company, is because I don't want to be the company. I want to be Colin, and I think that people fear failure so much because they tie themselves and their personas and their value to their ink, and they
A-
shouldn't.
Absolutely. And the sooner you start thinking, getting out of college and working for other people, other companies right off the bat, is right from the beginning, they went in with the idea, I'm going to get as many skills as I can. I'm going to ask as many questions. I'm going to volunteer for every project I possibly can. I'm going to meet as many people as I can. And I'm going to suck all of the education and experiences out of that company that I can, while I either locate my next step or I find my own company, and
Yeah.
if it doesn't crystallize, in a couple of years. And I talked to a high level, not high level, but like mid management, she called it, and on the podcast, a lady who did that all the time. And she said, when people make 80 to 100, 120,000, she said, the turnover there is every 2.5 years. And so if you know that, if you know that that's what happens for whatever reason, you're going to really want to make your time count wherever you are. That's the best thing you can
Right.
do to stay employed and move up, swim upstream and become more valuable, where the company knows who you are and they're going to keep you no matter what, because you're unique. You're making a money basically.
No,
But
my second job. So my first job was at Bridgewater. I got fired in 6 months. No hard feelings. And then my second job was as a recruiter, and I became a recruiter for banks, for hedge funds, for startups. That's how I got into startups. I started
okay, there
recruiting,
you go.
and that job, I was like a sponge. Like I learned everything I could about software development. I learned everything I could about the roles I was recruiting for, why is this role valuable, why is this role valuable, scoping out the roles of my clients, like understanding their business needs and why they needed to hire this person for their business needs. And it was such an incredible education with so much context switching. And I was up working till 2 a.m. every night, like messaging people on LinkedIn and trying to find the right candidate. And my colleagues used to call me a recruiting vampire. But even then you could see kind of like the differences between the way that I would approach that job versus somebody
Right,
who's treating it as a 9 to 5.
right.
I was 23 and I was like, I just got fired from my first job. I got to learn some shit, some
Yeah,
valuable, transferable
I-
shit.
there you go.
And yeah, and I ended up, funny enough, I ended up hiring myself at one of my clients in Seattle for a biz dev role. So then I moved to do a biz dev role. and then things kind of went from there for me. So, but yeah, you 100%. You gotta really. I used to make the coffee and take out the trash and do everything in between. Like I will say I think that that attitude is shifting a little bit, but then I'm just I start to think I'm the old guy being like kids these days, like
Right.
shaking my fist at a cloud and I'm 32, so it's not, yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Million Dollar Mastermind. If you felt there were any valuable takeaways from this episode, please take a minute and leave us a 5-star review. Your feedback is important and really helps us get the word out to a wider audience. Remember, we have a valuable webinar that is absolutely free. Register for it right now at weidelonwinning.com. Thanks for listening.